Hello and welcome to TrackVia's Intelligence for Admins, using integrations to merge data from TrackVia to a doc or PDF. My name is Michelle Martz Mayfield. I am the PR and Corporate Communications Manager here at TrackVia. And we're going to get started here with just a little bit of housekeeping, just so you're all informed. To start out, you are all in listen-only mode. Please keep it in listen-only mode so everyone can hear the presentation. If you have questions, and we do hope that you have some, please submit them via the chat window, and we'll follow up with those that we don't answer live in an email. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide that recording to you within 48 hours after the presentation. It's also available eventually on the TVU website so that you can find it there as well. I think that's all for our housekeeping, so I will turn it over to Derek and Tim for their presentation. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Go ahead, Tim.
All right. Tim Coletti here. I'm an implementation engineer with TrackVia, and I'll be helping Derek with this presentation. Derek, go ahead.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I am Derek. I lead our training and education efforts here at TrackVia. Thanks for joining our monthly admin webinar. I know everyone was probably super sad that we did not do one in September, but I'm glad to have this back in our monthly, back to our normal monthly cadence. You may have also seen that we kind of rebranded or renamed this webinar series. It was Tips and Tricks. We're now calling it Intelligence for Admins. So you'll probably see webinar invites for intelligence from admins or for admins moving forward. Make sure you don't just put those in your spam or your trash it. So this is what it is going forward. Just kind of aligns a little bit more with what we're doing on these. If you haven't joined one before, we just talk about anything TrackVia related, from new features to core functionality like dashboard design, all the way through app scripts and some of the more complex stuff. Today, we're talking about one of those more advanced features, integrations. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how you use integrations to merge data from TrackVia into a Word doc or PDF. So super excited to have Tim on the line here. He's one of our rockstar implementation engineers, and you'll be able to pick his brain as much as you want today about this stuff, integrations, and specifically with merging data. So glad to have Tim on the line to help everyone. So let's just go through a quick agenda. We'll start with an overview, just what we're talking about, what merging data actually is, and some examples. We'll move into options for merging data. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. We're going to talk about one of those ways today. One of those ways requires that we have some prerequisites set up for you before you can actually take advantage of this method. So we'll talk about what those prerequisites are. Then we'll get to the fun stuff. Tim's going to lead us through our demo, show us how to actually set up a merge, and we'll actually go through a live example, so you should see how that works. We'll bring it back. We'll do some questions. We'll answer some questions. Finally, we do our key takeaways, right? 3 or 4 points that you should remember if you take anything away from this presentation. And then there's a couple of points at the end to wrap things up. Okay. All right. So one thing I do want to point out before we jump in is we're going to do something a little bit fun on today's webinar. There's going to be a couple of prompts throughout, right? As we normally do, some questions for you to respond to, and then any questions at the just throughout the time that you have, feel free to chat them in. Please chat them in. So your comments, your questions, and actually we're going to pick a couple of people that participate at the end of the webinar. We'll pick them and we'll work with you to try to send you out some TrackVia t-shirts. So you'll get something fun to wear that says TrackVia across the front, or maybe the back. We'll see what t-shirts we got. But either way, in order to qualify for that, you just make sure that you participate in the prompts and ask your questions. Okay. All right. So let's jump into it today. we'll start with an overview of what we're talking about, merging data. Okay, so we all have TrackVia applications that we have worked hard to build, and we collect data and we store it in TrackVia and we analyze it and create nice graphs, and we even share it with colleagues so that they have visibility into that data. We do a lot of really cool stuff within the TrackVia system. But sometimes you really just need to get data out of TrackVia, right? And there's a lot of different formats and ways that you can do that. You can share via email, you can print it out using native browser print, maybe you can export to Excel, right? There's a lot of different ways to get data out of TrackVia. Sometimes you might want to get your data out into a Word doc or a PDF. Okay, as an example, you see the sales quote here that I have up on the screen. Maybe you want to print out a sales quote. There's a couple of options for how to get data into a PDF or a Word doc, and we'll go through some of those here in a second. But first, let's talk about common use cases that we see our customers frequently merging data to. Okay, or reasons for merging data, I should say. That's a little bit more clear. So first is a quote, right? Like you see here on the screen. Quotes are common, right? Maybe you have an order management application. Customer wants to order something from you. You want to provide them a quote, and you want to do so in a really nice formatted way, right? You can use this merging capability. Similarly, maybe you want to provide an invoice to a customer. So they have purchased something from you and you want to invoice them for that. Also in a similar vein, maybe you want to provide a receipt to a customer after they've paid for something. These are all similar, but they all usually require that you take data from TrackVia and get it out into a PDF or a Word doc that you can share with them, whether you mail it to them, print it out and mail it to them, or email it to them, whatever it may be. Okay. The last option that we have here, or the last use case that we frequently see, is formatted printouts. So you can use the native browser print in TrackVia to get information into Word doc or PDF, but a lot of times you might want something really fine-tuned in the way that it's formatted. For example, in this quote, you can see we have the TrackVia logo listed in the upper left. We've got this nice table grid on the screen. There's some information in the upper right? It's really formatted. You can't get that a lot of times with the native print. So sometimes using something like this, you can get those really unique and specific custom printouts. Okay. So this is our first prompt for today. If you have ways that you do use merging of data into Word docs or PDF, go ahead and chat those through. Okay, would love to hear from everybody about what their use cases for this type of feature are. Whether you do it now or whether you could see yourself doing something like this in the future. That's fine, just creative ideas for how you might use a feature where you could take data from TrackVia and merge it out. Okay, we'll read them at the end, right? So we'll see what folks say at the end that they use this type of functionality for, to give everyone some ideas. All right, so as there are many different options for or why you might want to do a merge, right? There are many different options for how you do that merge. They range from simple, such as going to a record in TrackVia and just using the native browser print, to much more complex, which would be, building your own API integration that pulls data out of TrackVia and puts information into a Word doc or PDF. That is probably the most advanced, but also probably gives you the most flexibility. Okay, so there's a whole host of options in this range of super simple without a ton of flexibility to super complex with a ton of flexibility. Okay, we're going to talk about one of those options today. Sometimes I make myself laugh on these PowerPoints, but we're going to talk about one of those options today, which is taking data from TrackVia, putting it through our integration platform also known as Workato, which a lot of you might be familiar with, and sending it to a third party called Formstack. Okay, this option is what we have found works best for our customers. It is the perfect blend of ease of use and flexibility. Okay, it's pretty easy to set up, and it gives you a lot of customization on that template. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, and that's what Tim's going to be walking us through. Now, before we turn it over to Tim, we'll just finish off here with a couple of prerequisites. There are two things that you need to make sure that you do before you can proceed with what Tim is going to show you. Okay. The first is you need to make sure that you have access to Formstack. Okay. We do partner with Formstack, so we can help you get set up with a Formstack account. Okay. So just talk to us and we'll get you set up there. Okay. The other thing that you need access to is the integration platform. Okay. Again, we can help get you set up with the integration platform. Okay. This is also Workato, right? Workato Integration Platform, same, they're synonymous. Okay. If you do not have access to either of these two things, you can reach out to your customer success manager, your account manager, and ask them about getting these two things set up. Okay. There is a cost. They can help you understand that pricing structure as well. Okay. But these two things are necessary to take this route. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and kick things over to Tim here, who's going to walk us through an example of a TrackVia application that we want to get data out of and into a template. Okay, so you should see Tim's screen now and not mine anymore.
All right. So yeah, today I'm going to walk you through a really simple version of this. We've compared it down to just the basics so we can get through all the steps. Sky's really the limit. They get more complex from here. So we're just going to run through one that's relatively simple. So I've got all the ingredients together. I have a TrackVia app, and I have an account in Formstack, and I have an account in Workato. Both of those are set up. And I also have a document here that I'm going to do the merging with. Again, this is just built in Word. It's a standard mail merge. This is part of Word. So we set up some tags here for what these are coming into. Basically, how it works is you put these the brackets and the dollar signs around a word, and that word becomes the tag that it's expecting for the information that's going to come in. So later, when we're pushing this information through our integrations platform, it's going to ask for it by these same names. But they can be anything you want. But basically, we've just got a little bit of information set up here for basically an invoice. We've put in who's doing the ordering and what are they ordering. The way this one is set up is, the person is at the top. This is basic parent table information. And then down here, the intention is that we'll have a number of child items that belong to that order that are going to all show up here. So we've used this table row tag, which is going to allow us to allow this table to expand for each of the items that we feed it. So what's going to happen is we're going to put this into Webmerge, and Webmerge is going to expect this information to come to it from Workato. And I'm going to come back to this a couple of times, so don't sweat it too much if you're not following. But the gist of it is that you're using the standard Microsoft Word merge functions, and then Formstack is going to really bring those to life. So first things first, let's go over to our app. So I've built a quick little app here for this demo. This top view is the view of the orders themselves. This next view is the child items. So these are the line items that belong to the order. And I'll tell you about this last view in a minute. So in an actual practice, these views would be scattered all over the place on your app. You know your business. You have views all over the place for all different people. I pulled them all together onto one dashboard just to make it a little bit easier. But in practice, you're going to be pulling these from all over the place. So the gist of it is what my goal is for this order to print onto a PDF as soon as somebody sets this particular field down here. I made a field called process order. It's just a checkbox. I want them to check that box, and as soon as they do, I want that to trigger sending that PDF from Formstack. And in this case, we're going to do it so that it sends that information to Formstack and then makes the PDF and then emails it to me. There are a lot of ways to set this up. The email is going to be the simplest one, so I'll show that to you today. These orders, again, we've got a line item number, we have what the item is, we've got a count and a unit price. Very simple, but you could do this with any number of fields. And then how I've set this view up is, this is called orders for Workato. This is the view that Workato is going to be looking at, and I'll come back to that. But basically, the integration platform has to look into TrackVia, and it has to have a place where we're telling it to expect those lines. So we tell Workato, anytime something shows up on one of these views, that's your cue to go ahead and send this over to Formstack and make the PDF. So how I've set this view up is, it's a view of that same orders tab, but I've created a filter to show only the ones that have that checkbox marked. So we have to do two things to make this work. First, we have to get Workato to do something as soon as it sees that checkbox, and then we also, at the end of the process, need Workato to come back and uncheck that checkbox so that this view doesn't fill up over time. We want it to just be a live view. And we'll do all those over the course of this. So basically, this is where we're starting, and then I'm going to head over to Formstack next. So Formstack, I have a Formstack account set up. I've just created a folder. I've already set things up behind the scenes to get it to work. So I'm going to create a new document, and it's going to ask me, what kind of document do I want to make? Well, I'm going to do webinar invoice. So we're going to create our webinar invoice, and it's going to ask me, how do I want to put it in? Now, they have a lot of example templates. If you don't have a document to start with, you can open up one of their templates, or it'll also let you build it in their document builder, which is pretty nice. I've used it a few times. It's nice. But if you already have it in Word, you just click over here and then upload it. So I'm going to grab it from another tab. So I'm just putting in that document. I'm going to tell it to send it to my email address. Again, Webmerge will integrate with all sorts of stuff. So if you're ever in here, poke around in there and see if there's anything else you're using that you want to try. But I'm just going to set it up to email it straight to me. And I'm also going to use this integrate with an external service. This is where it's asking us, how are we going to populate? Where's it going to come from? Formstack will let you do some unusual things. You can push things directly to Formstack's API. You can use a form. Formstack will actually feed a form to you for these too. But since we're going to get that information out of TrackVia, I'm going to pick this first one, which is basically telling Formstack, don't worry about it. I have that part. So then once it's connected, I have this document in here. If we go over to this overview, this will show the merge history. Once we turn this on, you could come here and it'll tell you how many of them per day are getting created. It'll give you a little bit of a record. I think there's maybe a week worth of documents that you can go look at after. And you can also click Manage File and come into it. It has a nice Word interface that will open up for you if you need to make any tweaks to it. So you don't have to keep uploading it over and over if you find that you have to make some adjustments to your file. They make it very easy. Now notice that my letterhead on the background isn't visible here. They do hide that in the editor, so don't worry if your letterhead disappears. So basically, we've got this sitting here ready to go. I'm going to go into the Settings tab. I'm going to make sure that it is going to be making a PDF. It'll send you a docx or a JPEG if you want. Generally, PDF is the way to go, as you know, but you can do the others. You have these different modes here. You have active. You also have a test mode where it'll export all of your data that you send to it. So while you're working on it, it's sometimes good to put it in test mode. It'll watermark the document, and it'll save everything that went into it. So if anything goes wrong, you can go look at those logs. But I'm just going to leave it in active because we should be in pretty good shape. This one is going to be, the file is going to be called webinar invoice, and then it's going to insert the date and time into that file name. But again, you can put whatever you need in there. So with that set up, the next step is to head over to Workato. So this is it's sitting here independently waiting for some signals from Workato to get working. So I'm going to go back to TrackVia. To get into Workato, if you have it turned on, you go to this icon up here and click Integrations. And when you click Take Me to TrackVia Integrations, it'll open up Workato in a new tab. So basically how Workato works is anything that you're going to do in there is a set of, they call it a recipe. It's kind of a subroutine where you create this set of steps to say when a certain thing happens, respond to it by doing another thing. You can put in repeating logic. You can put in if loops. You can put in all kinds of things like that. I'm going to say create recipe. just going to call it integration webinar, and I'm going to give it a location. Workato gives you the ability to make folders to organize your recipes. I'm just going to throw it in the plain home folder. And we're going to pick trigger from an app, but I want to call out that there is a run on a schedule option as well, because I know that sometimes you don't necessarily want this to happen based on when something is happening in TrackVia. A lot of times you may want this to run every morning at 9 a.m. or something like that, or maybe you want to run them in batches. Like you want to say, rather than running the invoice every time somebody submits an invoice, you might say, I'd like to make the PDFs for all of the invoices every hour, something like that. Very easy to do with the run on a schedule, slightly different design to the recipe, so I'm not going to get into that, but I just want to call out that it is there and there are ways to do it. So I'm going to click trigger from an app and start building. So what trigger from an app means is that we have a trigger in mind that's taking place in an app that is being connected to Workato, in this case, TrackVia. So I'm going to say that the trigger is going to be in TrackVia, and it's going to be a new record. So what it's going to ask me for is to give it a view. I'm going to connect. It's going to ask me which connection. I've already set one up. What it's going to do is if you don't have one yet, it'll just ask you to connect. It'll ask you for your username and your password and to authorize Workato to connect to your account. So I'm going to click that. It's going to ask me which application in my account that I'd like to use and which view that I'd like to look at. I'm going to use Formstack Integration Webinar. And the view that I'm going to use is Orders for Workato, that one that I showed you earlier. So all of the views in that app are going to show up in this dropdown. So I'm going to pick that. And then what that means is that anytime a new record gets created in this Orders for Workato view, or rather as soon as a record enters that view, that'll be Workato's trigger. So Workato right now is going to be looking at that view, waiting for it to come in. So what's happening behind the scenes is that the system is sending a notification to Workato, hey, something has dropped into this view, it's ready to go. Workato grabs that data and begins its sequence. So we have a few different things we're going to have to do. We're going to collect those parent records. We're going to collect the record up here so that we know what's triggering it. Then for our next step, we need to go into that second view, that child view, which if we look at our ERD, we have orders and line items just as two different tables, parent-child. So we need to look in our parent table, get the item that's triggering it, and then in the immediate next step, we need Workato to go look at that order lines table and find all the order lines that belong to the one that triggered the recipe. So I'm going to go back over here, I'm going to hit plus and say, what happens next? All right, so it gives you an option here. You can say either an action in an app, and this is just another one of these items where you're connecting to an application to do something in that app. But you can also, and we're going to use a couple of these later, you can also put in things like conditional sets where you can say, only do this next part if the right condition is met, or do this next part for as long as the condition is met on a loop, things like that. And we're just going to pick at TrackVia. We're going to grab all view records. This one means that we're going to go into TrackVia, we're going to go to a view that I've specified, and we're going to get everything in it just to start with. We're going to have to process it in later steps. I'm going to say get all view records, same thing. I'm going to go to the webinar. And I'm going to get line items for Workato. So this is another view that I've created over here. So just to go to it, line items for Workato is just showing the line items that that are ready to go, that belong to this item. So I'm going to have Workato go in and grab them all. There's also the search text box. We're going to use this. This box means that when Workato goes here to get it, Workato is effectively coming to this view just like this, and anything that I put here, Workato is going to enter into the search box. And then it's going to bring back every record that's still there after it has done that search. So if I say, if I put 3 in here, I'm only going to get one of these line items, and it's going to come back that way. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use this search field to narrow it down a little bit so that I'm only getting the ones that have this order in it. And obviously, it's possible for this order number to appear elsewhere in the record. If I tell it to search for 1,000, because 1,000 is the order number, it's also going to find me hits on any record that's $1,000, something like that. So it's very easy to get those false positives, and we're going to have to do a little bit of work to hide that. So the first thing we do is I'm going to go in here, go to that search text. I'm going to put in, this is called a data pill. That's what these little items are called. Workato's language for this is any piece of information that's moving in and out from one of these apps and moving through Workato gets encapsulated in these data pills. And it'll tell you a little bit about them in this list. If it has been run before, it'll even give you a bit of a preview of some of the data that it has seen come through that pill in the past. So what I want to do is I want to search this second view of the child items, and I want to search it by the name of the parent item, because I want it to search this column right here. And this column is the relationship field that goes up to the parent. And that order number is 1000. So I'm going to go back over here and look at that step 1 output. This is everything that Workato received from that first step. And I'm going to tell it to get the record ID, because the record ID is the same as what shows up in this dropdown on that child record. So once I have that record ID in there, that means that TrackVia is going to have that trigger, send it to Workato. Workato is going to go back over to TrackVia and look at the second view. It's going to search for everything with an order number that matches the item that created this whole sequence. Then, to remove any false positives from that, I'm going to do an each loop. So I'm going to repeat an action. And what this means is that it's going to do it for each item in the list. I'm going to choose for the basis of that repetition all of the records from step 2. So see how we have step 1 here and step 2 here. Rather than picking individual fields, since it's asking me for an entire list, I'm able to click this and put in all of the records. What I'm basically saying is I want to loop through everything it found on step 2. It may just be 1 record, it may be 10 records, but I want it to loop through each one of them, and I want it to do something one by one as it does that. So we're going to loop through each of those records, and then down in this next step, I'm actually going to clear this one out. I'm not using an app. I'm going to do another logical step and put in an if condition. So basically, for each record in step 2, I am then going to check a bit of logic before I do something. And that bit of logic I'm going to check is going to be the ID. So the relationship field is right here, so it's order, and then there's a second version of the relationship field called order ID. What this means is that it is looking in that relationship field, and it's pulling out the underlying database ID for that record. So if I take this right here, what this is saying is, show me the underlying unique ID for the parent record of each of these children. And then I'm going to compare it to, I'm going to say equals exactly, compare it to going back up to step 1, and then on step 1, I'm going to say ID, because that's that same field. So here we're looking at it through a parent relationship, and then here we're looking directly at it on the parent. So what this means is that for each of those child records in the second step, we're going to loop through them and check to make sure that the order that they belong to truly is identical to that first step order. So we'll get no false positives there. And then once it's been selected, I'm going to need to build a list out of it. So what we're going to do here is, in order to send all this over to Webmerge, we have to collect all those child items and put them into an array. Webmerge is going to want, for specifically the part of this document where we're making this table row down here, we need that to be in the form of an array as it goes back over to Webmerge, because Webmerge needs to see it as a list of items that each contain their own separate fields. So in order to feed that to Webmerge as an array, I'm going to need to build the array here as an accumulated list. And fortunately, Workato has a very cool tool for this. So if we go, I'm going to search lists, and I'm going to say lists by Workato. This is anytime you see one of these that says by Workato, it's just a little data management tool that they put in that behaves as though it were a standalone app. I'm going to say accumulate items to a list. And I'm just going to give this an arbitrary name. Let's just call it list items. And I'm going to create some fields in it. So I need to make sure that I have a field in here that belongs to each of these. And to make sure that they match, I'm going to use exactly the same spelling, punctuation, capitalization that I've used here. And I really recommend on these to go all lowercase. It makes it a little bit easier. Because what's happening is everything that you put into here is going to be converted into a JSON array that's sent over there. Capitalization can get a little bit hairy on these. So I really recommend just lowercase only. It'll make your life a lot easier. So I'm going to go here. First one is going to be number. So it's the item that's coming in is called a line, and the field on that item is called a number. So I'm going to use number, item, count, and price as our 4 items. So for each one, I'll click Add Field, and in lowercase, item.
Awesome.
Item
And
number.
while Tim's adding these 4 fields, remember that if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat so we can either answer them as we go through this, if they, if it makes sense to answer them while Tim's going through, or we'll keep them to the end and answer it at the end as well. So I know this is sometimes a little more advanced, so feel free to throw anything out there.
Yep. So with these, basically, I think we have a question. Is there a way to put a condition on the order of the order ID onto step 2? Basically, that is what the search field is. It's as close as we can get to that. So while we can put a condition into that step 1 for saying, I'd like to say that only records that meet my criteria will truly trigger this recipe, when we get on to step 2, we're instead telling it, just go get everything out of this view. And the most we can do at that stage is the search. So then we do a filter. We do our filter manually through this each loop. So basically what I'm going to do here is, now I've got this accumulation items. So what's going to happen is every time this loop gets down to this part, it's going to take the items that I specify and add them to the list. And it's just going to build this array over time. So whether there's 3 or 100 line items, each time it gets to one, it'll just tack it right on the end of the list. So it should be pretty easy to match them because the field names are basically the same as what I'm dealing with here. So we've got item, count. Here we're going to use the auto counter because we're using the auto counter is what's creating that record ID. You might rename the auto counter in your app, but you see what I mean. So this auto counter over on the TrackVia side, every time a record gets created, is going to increment by 1. So we're just going to use that exact same field to number our items in the document, and then price. So that's the first part. So now we have 2 different pieces of information. We have all the information about the parent item that has just come over to us from TrackVia in that first trigger. Then we have all of the child items that have been rolled up into this nice list. So now we're ready. We can go Action and App and Formstack Documents. I'm going to say Merge Document, and I've already set up my account. Again, it'll ask you for some credentials that you can get out of the Formstack account, and they have some documents that'll help you with that. So then I'm going to do webinar invoice. So I'm just going to check them all. I don't need this very last one, but I'll leave it in there just to tell you about it. Basically, this is all of the fields that it is asking me for. However, you will notice that in this list, you don't see number, item, count, or price, because those are all encapsulated inside this order lines. That means that what Workato wants you to just put a data pill in here, but what Webmerge is actually expecting is a full array. So for this one, I'm going to click over into formula mode because that'll allow me to put in this items. And what this is that entire accumulated list. So no matter how many times it went through this list of items still exists in there. And if I pull it in as an items pill like that, rather than picking the individual fields, what I'm actually saying is I want the whole array, all the fields, all the items, I want the whole list. I'm going to just shove that whole list in JSON format into this field, and that's all going to get sent over to Webmerge. And Webmerge should be able to interpret that correctly because we've named those fields on this step exactly the same as they are on the Webmerge document. So it should hand them over pretty seamlessly. For the rest of them is easy mode. A name, I'm just going to get them straight off of step 1. There's only one record. There's nothing else to figure out there. There's only going to be one email. There's only going to be one company because these fields all come straight from the initial triggering record. So when I get down to this one, I'm going to open up step 1 so that I can pick it. Workato does a good job of suggesting the data pill it thinks you might want, but if they're spelled differently, address 1 versus address line 1, it's not going to notice that. So with all of those in, this is the payload that it's going to send over to Webmerge. So I'm going to hit save to see if it runs into any errors or anything. It looks like we're clear. So if I save it, if I click exit now, I've got a finished recipe and I can click start. And if I click start, it's going to take us over to this job screen. It's going to start listening. And this is where we're now ready to go. So if I go over here to TrackVia and open up that first view, if I go here and check this box, it should immediately generate a job in Workato the minute I do. It'll pop up it'll say that it's made that change to the record. And that tells me that that change has been committed to the database. So if we go back over here, there should be a trigger. And there it is. So 10:35, this ran. And if I open up each of these steps, I can look through what ended up happening. Here's exactly what it did. Here's the information that it received. I can do that with each one. I can open up, this shows all 3 of the line items that it found. For each, it shows me that it found 3, it looped through 3, and then the final accumulated list looks like this. So then finally it got down to this last step, sent it over to Workato, and this is the JSON that it sent over there. So we can see here are the fields, here are the top fields, and then here are the fields that go into those rows. And they're all labeled in the JSON with exactly the name that Webmerge is expecting for them. So then if I go over to my email, I'm going to grab one of these and drag it over. And here is our document. It has been generated, turned into a PDF, and emailed straight to me. So the other ways you could vary this, like I said before, you have this first step. This is just based on triggering on the record being created in TrackVia. You could set this up to say run every hour, in which case, rather than relying on this first step to give you your information, the trigger would just be run every hour, and then we'd look up 2 different views. We'd look up the parent view, and we'd look up the child view. We could do something where we say, look up the parent view, and then for each parent, look up the child view, find its children, run a Webmerge document. Then go right back, show me the second parent, find all of its children, send them all to Webmerge. So you could batch these in a pretty large chunks and send them all over together. Workato is very flexible that way. And I find that there are a lot of recipes that are set on triggers that you can convert them over to running every hour, and it works pretty well. But that's the thing. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, you can, we'll take the screen share back here. We'll see if we can get some questions. So while we're having folks send their questions through, may need to flip back to, excuse me, your screen at some point, Tim, but we'll figure that out. See, share my screen. Should see that pop back up. Yeah, so while we're waiting for a couple of questions to come through, remember that the recipe, while it may have looked like a few steps, and it is a few steps, right? There's really, you can break it down into 5 pieces. You are configuring when you want the recipe to run, which is the record falling into that view. Then you would get all of the line items associated with that record. Okay, so you get the parent, then you get the children. Step 3 is that verification that Tim went through, right? So check each line item to make sure it's really linked to the order. Then send the data to Formstack to be processed. And then it'll email you the file or however you set up the delivery. And then the last step, which we actually didn't configure in the recipe, is that you want to make sure you go back and take that record out of the view, just so you don't accumulate a huge list of things in that view. It just keeps it performant, okay? So this was actually on the scale of merges that we see, actually on the more complex side, if you can believe that, right? Because we actually have, you're triggering a parent record and it's getting a bunch of child records and it's putting those into a loop in a table in your document, right? You can have much simpler merges than this, even if you're just merging one parent record or something like that, right? So it's actually kind of on the more advanced side of that spectrum. Okay. All right, so it looks like we've got a few questions that have come through. So let's see if we can answer some of these. Let's see. Thanks for your question before, Damon. By the way, great question. If you can roll up that logic into step 2. All right, let's see. Let's see, Tim. Brian is asking, can you sort the list? So I think in the document that you, when you did your merge, the line items were listed as 3, 2, 1. And I think, Brian, your question is, can those be 1, 2, 3? So can we sort that list, Tim?
Yes. So it's actually really interesting. When Workato goes to get items out of TrackVia, it respects the sort order of the view that it's getting them from. So when you have it go get all the child items and you're going to have it each loop through them, it's going to loop through them in exactly the order that it got them from TrackVia in. So if you make a view just for Workato to look at, put in a sort. Put in a default sort on that view, and Workato will go get them in exactly the order you want, and it'll process them in the order you want. And that opens up some pretty fun stuff. So yeah, basically you can sort it. Once you get it over into Workato, there are a couple of tools. Workato will let you hand off a list into another list. So if you need to do some more complicated sorting that you can't accomplish with the TrackVia view, you can use some of Workato's appliances to hand that information around internally in the recipe and create a sort. So basically, yes, the easiest way is to just sort the view that Workato is getting it from in just the right way. Sometimes you may need to do a reverse sort so that Workato will assemble the list in the way you're looking for. But for the most part, you can just sort the view that Workato is getting the items from, and then Workato will hold on to them in that same sorted order until it's done.
Awesome. Then we've got a couple of questions, one from David, one from Linda, that have to do with delivery and email addresses. So can we send the merged document to different email addresses? We just saw that one, Tim, went to you. Can it send to somebody else that you specify, or can it even send to multiple people?
Yes. So I can show it to you if you can share it with me.
Let's see if we can flip back to Tim's screen here.
All right, so over in Webmerge, there's a tab called Deliver, and this by default it's just going to want to send to you. But you can say New Delivery, and it'll ask you for more information. So you can put it any of their partner delivery services. You can send it through, but you can also just set up additional emails. You can even format the email differently for different people or different groups. It's pretty easy to do. So basically, yes, you set up these as a series of rules on the Formstack side, and it just follows them once it gets that document.
And then one more item on that, Tim, if you edit that delivery again, there's actually also a toggle there that you may have seen for a merge field. Yeah, if you hit the edit button. Perfect. So right now we're sending to a specific email, and that's just not the send from one, but one up from that, up at the top of there. Yeah. So the send to email, it says you can send to a specific email address. Right now it's Tim's, but you could put merge field there and then choose any of the fields that are coming through Workato into your merge. So what this means is in TrackVia, you could type an email address into like a single line field or an email address field and send that through to Workato, and then subsequently Formstack, and it'll email to that person. So really flexible with delivery options.
Yep, and you can include any of the merge fields that are in the document. You can include them in the text of the email as well. So it's obviously useful to put the the title of the project or whatever in the subject of the email so they know what they're looking at.
Good point. A lot of questions coming through. Folks want one of these really cool TrackVia t-shirts, I guess. All right. Let's see. Beth, is Webmerge the same as Formstack? So yes, you may have heard us say both of those things. You may be familiar with both those systems in the past. Formstack actually acquired Webmerge a while back. So they're one in the same product. Webmerge is the specific function of Formstack that merges documents. So, okay, let's see. Damon has another question about email. Emailing, did the sender come across as the owner of the connector or the individual who triggered the recipe?
It's the owner of the connector. Yeah, the owner of the connector. Anytime something is crossing that bridge from TrackVia into another system, it's the owner of the connector is who did it. Now, if you you can set up recipes so that you have more than one connector with more than one person if you want a specific person's name to show up on something that's going back to TrackVia. But yeah, the connector is doing all that work.
Okay. Let's see. All right, Tim, we've got a question from Megan. Can we merge with Excel? So, there's an import function and an export. But is there a way we could do something like this? Read data. Is there a way to integrate and read data from a differently formatted Excel sheet? So I think, Megan, if I'm misinterpreting your question, let me know. Is there a way to get data from an Excel spreadsheet into TrackVia or out of TrackVia in a way that it's not formatted exactly as TrackVia wants it? I think that's probably accurate. Let's see what Tim's got going here.
Yeah, so there is a in Workato, there is a tool called CSV by Workato. And there's more CSV than Excel, but it will parse, it can compose or parse CSVs. So you could theoretically, and this is a little bit higher difficulty, but you could have somebody put an Excel document into a document field in TrackVia, and then have that document get sent over to Workato, where Workato could parse it and then send the fields from it over to Webmerge really easily. But sending the documents directly into Webmerge, you can do an XLS upload in Webmerge, but I don't think that you can do it very easily through the integration without having Workato crunch it a little bit. So it'll need to do something to parse that CSV. You can do the same thing with the Google Sheet. If you had people who were putting something into Google Sheet or a SharePoint site or something like that, you can similarly have it help out. You could have a record in TrackVia trigger it to have it go fetch something from your SharePoint to help out. That sort of information I do think that in the end, you'll probably still need Workato to crunch it a little bit to get that data over to Webmerge. But yes, there are ways to accomplish that for sure.
Awesome. Okay, there are a couple more questions, but in interest of time, we're not going to get to all of them. So if we didn't get to your question, no worries. We will follow up with you directly with answers. Okay. But before we go, I did want to share some of the suggestions that folks had for how you might use this, or even suggestions that or tips and tricks, I'll say that folks sent through as well. So Matt, thanks, just sent through a comment that if you want to deliver to multiple people, you actually can do email addresses separated by semicolons as well in a merge field. So it doesn't just have to be one email address. Love that. Brian, also tip and trick from Brian, you can bring the document back into TrackVia. So you can actually use Workato to get that document, send it back to a record in TrackVia, attach it to a record, and then it can notify, and you can use all the in-house notification share features of TrackVia to keep people in the loop with merges as well. So there's some good tips for you. All right. Let's look at some of the ways that people use this type of merging functionality, just to get some folks, give some folks some ideas. Nathan says he merges out employee schedules, rosters, and timesheets. Matt says multi-level quote, kind of like what we looked at today, I think. Also a contact sheet for customers that's formatted in a nice clean way. So whoever is handling an account just can have a printout of all of the contacts and it looks really nice. That's a great use case. Love that. Also invoices to merge to customers. Let's see. Michael. Hello, Michael. He says formatted invite to be printed and mailed to clients that join their program. That's a really great use case. Yeah. New client wants to join, print out an invite with all their information. Love that. Send it, print it out, send it to them. Looks like a few other folks. Stephanie, do something similar to what we showed today. I think that's most of the use cases that I see that came through. And Damon threw in one more at the end here, a project status report to send to a customer. Really, really great idea, right? So if you're working on a project for a customer, print out a project status report that has some information on it, or merge that. Looks really nice, background, letterhead, love it, and then send that to the customer. Great. Okay, so let me see if I can take the screen share back here and just wrap things up for us today. Okay, so we should see this PowerPoint again. All right, so some key takeaways. There are a lot of options for actually performing these merges. We highly recommend what we showed you today with the integration platform and Formstack. It's going to give you a ton of flexibility, and it's easy to use, right? We just saw Tim created one just through a couple of clicks in 10 minutes or so. And then also you get all the robust logging that he showed. And if there's errors, you can handle them that way. It does a lot. So this is typically what we see work best for our customers. The steps to doing this or to merging a document using this route are to create everything you need in TrackVia, your views and your fields and all that stuff. Then you create that Word template that Tim showed, which just uses the standard mail merge type placeholders. You upload that to Formstack, and then you set up the recipe. So those are your kind of 4 steps in your process. And then lastly, best practice is to remove that record from the view at the end, just so you don't accumulate a whole list of documents that have been merged.
And I didn't get to show you that part, but basically that you just add a step at the very end of your recipe that goes back to TrackVia and edits that record to clear it.
Awesome. Okay, so we covered, there was a lot today, right? There's a whole Formstack or Webmerge piece. There's a Workato or the integration platform piece. There's a TrackVia piece, right? A lot of things in there. If you want more information about the integration platform, we do have a course on the TrackVia University website. It's free. All of the courses on the TrackVia University website are free. Go check it out. We've got information in there on how to set up recipes, connectors, all that kind of stuff that Tim kind of went through today. So definitely check that out. Tim also wrote a great blog this month on can we integrate? So I think a question came through that asked about connecting with something that's not in there. Check out that blog that Tim wrote. That's going to give you some really good information on that. If you have more questions, of course, always support is available. You can email them, you can pick up the phone, you can call them, and they will get you the answers that you need. Okay. Of course, if you need something more robust than just a phone call, if you need us to help you with something, or you just don't have time, you want us to do something for you, we've got our professional services team, of which Tim is a part of course, and we are there to help you if you need it. Okay. Our next webinar is November 24th. Currently, we may move that to the 23rd. We'll see, just kind of like really close to Thanksgiving. Either way, we're going to do another topic we haven't done yet in one of these webinars, which is flows. That's going to be a good one, specifically something called looping through child records in flows, which is something that a lot of our customers actually end up doing in their flows. So really excited to show you how to do that. And finally, there's going to be a survey right here at the end. If you have a couple of minutes to fill it out, we really appreciate it. Any feedback you can provide, and you'll get the recording of this as well. All right, I think that's all we have for you today. So thanks everyone for the participation. We'll pick a couple of people. We'll reach out to you, probably send you an email and send you a t-shirt. And thanks. I think this was a great webinar. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. All right. I'll talk to everyone next month.